The story was always bigger than I was. That is the first thing I tell people when they ask how I survived Drev Utha station, and it is also the most honest thing I know. I was a princess once, Sarah Vale, third daughter of the Vale conclave, heir to nothing in particular, useful mainly for the political marriage I refused. When the conclave stripped my title and issued the exile decree, they assumed they were erasing me. What they did instead was gives me 7 years of transit halls and refugee circles and children who needed someone to sit with them in the dark and make the dark smaller. I became a storyteller. It was not a plan. It was what happened when every other door closed. The legend I told most often, the one the children always asked for by the time I reached my third colony stop, was the one I had invented on a cold bunk on the cargo hauler that first took me out of Vale space. I was 26, I had nothing, and I was trying to remember what safety felt like. What Isa came up with was a man, not a king. Not a soldier decorated with honors. A human man, quiet and unremarkable, who appeared at the edges of hard places and simply did not leave. In the story I called him the steady one. He had no palace, no army, no grand speech. He just stayed. When the guards left and the lights went out and the children cried, and no one came, the steady one came. He sat down on the floor. He waited with them until morning. I told that story on 11 colony stations over 7 years. I told it in medical bays and in cargo holds, and in the long gray transit halls where displaced families paid for processing with their entire lives reduced to a reference number. I told it in Vale and in Dravathi, and in the common trade tongue that everyone understood and no one owned. I do not know how many children heard it. I know how many asked for it again. Nearly all of them. I had not thought of it as a true story. That is the thing I need you to understand before I tell you what happened on Drev Utha. The steady one was a comfort I had manufactured. He was real the way all necessary things are real before they arrive. Drev Utha was the worst station I had worked. 3,000 displaced Rithani packed into a hall rated for 800. Processing running 6 weeks behind. The food broken on the lower level. Children sleeping on the bare floor, because the cot requisition had been pending for a month. Administrator Kolath Rund ran the station with the particular efficiency of a man who had stopped seeing the people in front of him and now saw only their reference numbers. He had seen mine. I found out from a sympathetic intake clerk, a young Dravathi woman named Asa, who passed me the document, quietly while I was setting up my corner of the hall. Stateless transfer filing, reference S. Vale 1714. My Vale exiled decree had finally been flagged by the station's compliance system. Rund had signed the transfer that morning. I had, by Asa's estimate, 1 hour before the security detail came to collect me and move me to the detention annex, where I would wait, indefinitely. It's unclassified cargo. I looked at the filing for a long moment. Then I folded it, put it in my coat pocket, turned to the children who had gathered at my feet. If I had 1 hour, I was going to use it. "Who wants the steady one?" I asked. Every hand went up. I was 40 minutes into the story when he came in. I noticed him the way you notice a change in the light. Not dramatically, just a peripheral shift. The main door at the far end of the hall opened, and a human man in colony security fatigues stepped inside. He was perhaps 40, perhaps older. The kind of age that is difficult to read on a human, because the weathering comes from use, not years. Dark hair going gray at the temples. A jaw that had been broken once and had healed slightly crooked. He moved quietly, the way people move when they have learned that entering a room loudly costs something. He saw the circle of children, saw that I was mid-story, and without a word he found a section of empty wall 20 meters away, put his back to it and settled in to wait. He did not look impatient. He did not look like a man waiting for a task to complete. He looked like a man who had found a reason to be still. I went back to the story. The steady one was at the part where he sits down on the floor of the transit hall. This was always the part where the younger children leaned in, where the hall got very quiet, and I was watching the faces in the circle, gauging where I was, when one of the smallest children turned. She was 3 years old, gray-skinned, Rithani, with the wide dark eyes of her species, that always looked solemn even when she was happy. She had asked for the steady one every day for the 4 days I had been on Drev Utha. Her name was Ori. She turned from me, to cross the hall at the human man standing against the wall, and pointed at him with one small finger. Him, she said. The word was very quiet. She was not performing. She was stating a fact. The children nearest her turned to look. Further back turned when they saw the children nearest them looking. I felt the circle shift, particular quality of collective attention moving like water. I had stopped speaking. I had not decided to stop speaking. I had simply run out of words. He hadn't heard her. He was still standing against the wall, relaxed, eyes moving through the room with the automatic low-grade vigilance of someone in a security role. He caught me looking, caught the whole circle looking, and he straightened slightly, uncertain if he had done something wrong. Put her hand down. She turned back to me and waited for the rest of the story. I finished it. I do not know how. My voice was steady, because it had learned to be steady in 7 years of hard rooms. Something in my chest had broken open, and I was not entirely sure what had come out of it. Rund arrived 9 minutes later, as I was folding the small woven mat I used to mark my storytelling corner. 2 station security in standard gray uniform, Rund himself behind them with a data tablet, and the expression of a man who was not expecting resistance, and was faintly disappointed to be denied it. Svale, 7-7 Warfi said. You'll come with us. The human man from the wall was suddenly present. He had not been near us a moment ago. Now he was. Without drama, simply standing at the edge of the exchange. He had a data tablet of his own. She's under active sponsorship review, he said. His voice was even without heat. Colony Security Drev Utha Station, filed this morning. He turned the tablet so Rund could see the timestamp. While you were filing the transfer, I was filing the sponsorship. The system processes them in order of submission. Mine was first. Rund looked at the tablet. He looked at the man. He looked at me. On what basis, Rund said, does a security officer sponsor a stateless foreign national with an active exile decree? Colony Charter, Article 9, Subclause 4, citizens providing documented humanitarian service to displaced populations at an active transit site qualify for temporary protected status pending full review. He paused. She's been providing humanitarian service for 4 days. I have the intake logs from OSA at Desk 7. You will take 6 weeks. The transfer order is suspended in the meantime. Rund stood very still. Then he took his tablet, turned and left. His security detail followed. The human man watched them go. Then he looked at me. I'm Harlan Moss, he said. I've been at this station 4 months. I've watched what you do with those kids every morning. He stopped, as if he had intended to say something more, and had decided it wasn't necessary. I filed it this morning because it seemed like the right thing to do. I found him an hour later in the corridor outside the lower hall, running a systems check on the secondary air circulation unit. I stood at the edge of his light until he noticed me. Can I tell you something? I said. That is going to sound strange? He looked up. He did not tell me it wouldn't sound strange. He just waited. I told him about the story. About the 7 years. The 11 stations. The legend I had invented on a cold bunk. Because I needed to believe that a man like that existed, somewhere. I told him what Ori had said, and where she had pointed, and what her face had looked like when she said it. Certain, quiet, settled, the way children are certain when they have recognized something real. He listened to all of it. He didn't speak. When I finished, corridor was very quiet. The ventilation unit hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a child was laughing. I'm not a legend, he said finally. No, I said. You're better than that. You're the version that actually showed up. He looked at me for a long moment. His expression was the kind that does not perform anything. That simply is what it is. Open and steadier than I deserved after 7 years of telling myself the story was invented. 6 weeks, he said. That's how long the review takes. Yes. Then I suppose, Harlan Moss said, we have 6 weeks to figure out what comes after. I had spent 7 years telling children that the steady one always stayed. I had not, until that moment, understood that the story had always been told in the wrong direction. It was not a legend about a man who appeared. It was a legend about a woman who finally stopped moving long enough for him to find her.